Okay, this is it. 2 months have passed since we started the Overwatch League 2019 Roundup. We have been through every single team, right from Atlanta Reign all the way through until the Washington Justice. Welcome to the Overwatch League Roundup 2019 Power Rankings. Oh boy, am I going to upset some people and probably please a lot others. Okay, this is going to be long, this is going to be indecisive. The reason I say that is because no one can make a full judgment on these teams. Some teams are completely different to what they were last year, some teams didn't even exist last year. So we really don't know what some of these teams are going to produce. But we can also predict perhaps what some of the other teams might produce considering their performances last year and the fact that their rosters haven't changed that much. So, I have trawled the internet. I have looked at other people's power rankings and passed my own judgment on them. You know, whatever. It's completely my opinion. I might be completely wrong, I might be completely right. If I'm completely right, I want a medal. Because power rankings very often are not right. You look at last year and everyone picked Seoul Dynasty to win the league. They came 8th. They didn't even get in the playoffs. New York Excelsior were backed as one of the worst out of the 3 Korean teams that started off last year. They ended up being very, very dominant. So, take this with a pinch of salt. But this is your power rankings for 2019. We're going to go from bottom to top, as most people will do. Now, obviously, we're not like ESPN and the Overwatch League preview, where they copped out with the top 10. That's not very good. Let's do this properly, shall we? 1 to 20 in ascending order. We start off with the team that I think is going to finish bottom of the league this season. I don't think it's going to be Shanghai Dragons. I think it's going to be the Washington Justice. The reason I say this: Washington don't look like a particularly strong roster. They have some decent backroom staff. I believe they have Wizard Hayoung from NYXL. Can those coaching staff carry the players they've got? Remember they signed Janus, the main tank from New York Excelsior. He wasn't particularly good for NYXL when he started last season. So, they could be interchangeable with my 19th place team. But I think Washington will be bottom of the league. 19th place, I have the Chengdu Hunters. The Chengdu Hunters are an interesting one. I don't think they'll be like the Shanghai Dragons, despite the fact that they are an all-Chinese roster. We have seen some of the Chengdu Hunters before in the Overwatch World Cup, especially people like Late Young. So I think Chengdu are not going to be crazy bad, but I also don't think they're going to be playoff material. I think they're going to be near the bottom. Let's just put it that way, shall we? Florida Mayhem are up next in 18th. Florida are nowhere near as bad as they were last season. Let's get that out of the way first. Are they good enough to reach the playoffs? No. No, I really don't think so, especially with the talent in the league this year. There's a lot of teams that have improved and new teams that I think are better than Florida. So I think, unfortunately, it's another season where the Florida Mayhem will miss out on the playoffs and be near the bottom of the league. Next up is the 17th place team. Now, this could be slightly controversial, but I think everyone agrees that their roster is significantly weaker than it was last season. They are the big movers. It's the Boston Uprising. I quite heavily slated their team in the preview for Boston this season, and I kind of stand by that. I don't think they've made good enough signings to replace the likes of Striker, and we all know that they lost Dreamcasper last season, and I don't think they properly replaced him because Dreamcasper was actually quite good despite his downfall, shall we say. I don't see they've got another DPS player like him. I would like to be proven wrong, and again, as I said earlier, these are power rankings of my opinion based on what I've seen. We are yet to see what these teams can do in the Overwatch League environment when the league kicks off in February, or in next week, I should say. I'm recording this prior to the event, you might have guessed. Next up in 16th, I've got Guangzhou. Now, I would like to believe that Guangzhou will do better than this, but I am acting on my brain here. Now, a lot of people, I've seen people putting Guangzhou at the bottom of the league. I've seen people saying that Guangzhou are going to struggle because of language barriers, because they've got people who speak English, Mandarin, Korean. To a certain extent, yes, that might happen, but it depends how the backroom staff deal with that. I'm going to put forward an example of the Philadelphia Fusion. The Philadelphia Fusion, I believe last year, were the most diverse roster in the whole league. They were runners-up to the champions London Spitfire. So, I don't think diversity in a roster is a problem. It depends whether the staff and the players can get along well enough where that diversity doesn't become an issue. There you go. In 15th, I have got another newbie. It's the Toronto Defiant. I don't believe the Toronto Defiant are playoff material, unfortunately. I think they are a decent team, and I believe Toronto could be a bit of a San Francisco shock, where they make some improvements in the mid-season transfer window, which may see them creep up a bit. But I don't see them in the playoffs. I just don't see it. I think it's beyond them this season. Next season, however, the 2020 season, I know that's very far ahead. Maybe. Just maybe. Now, this might be a bit controversial. In 14th, missing out on the playoffs, I have got the Houston Outlaws. Now, I did say in the preview for Houston that they have improved, and indeed I stand by that. The addition of Dante is crucial for Houston. Otherwise, if they had not added Dante, I would have been putting them down with Boston. So, yes, but I don't think it's enough. Not with the improvements that some other teams have made. I think they're going to just miss out. They're going to be in a tussle, though. I think 15th and 4th, 15th through to about 10th could be very close. Very, very close, and that's the borderline between not getting any playoffs and getting the 7 to 12 playoffs, the runners-up playoffs, as I call them. So, I think Houston have a chance, but at the moment, I'm going to put them in 14th. In 13th, this team is a bit lower than other people's power rankings. It's the Paris Eternal. Now, why do I say that? Because Paris Eternal, I have got a feeling they might be very one-dimensional, and you can't be that in the Overwatch League. I don't know how Paris might gel into the league. As an all-EU team, it's a very uncharted territory we're going into. We have never seen an all-EU roster compete in the Overwatch League. I don't know how they will adjust. And I think it might take them a season to settle down. And then the season after, they'll perk up and they'll say, alright, this league's here. We're used to it now. Let's take it. And then I think you might see them do a lot better. I, again, think they'll be in the tussle for those outsiders playoffs. But I think they'll just miss out. And that's unfortunate. I'd like to see Paris in the playoffs, and they could be interchangeable with the other 3 teams coming up. Because in 12th place, I've got the Dallas Fuel. Now, the Dallas Fuel were big disappointers from last season. And I think they've made some very good adjustments to their roster. And I think they've made just the right adjustments, which I think can propel them into a playoff place. But it will be the runners-up playoffs, as I want to call them now. I don't think they can do top 6. I think that's well beyond Dallas Fuel right now. Unless they give us some real surprises, which, you know, if they do, that's nice. But I am very locked in on my top 6, which we'll go through in a minute. But I don't have many doubts about my top 6 right now. Unless there are any surprises from the teams below them. And it would have to be fairly big surprises, like Philadelphia were last season. We might see another Philadelphia, and we might see Dallas or Paris, Toronto. We might see something surprise us, and if we do, it will be very interesting. But I've got Dallas in 12th. In 11th, I've got the Atlanta Reign. Now, some people have put the Atlanta Reign outside the playoffs. A lot of people kind of interchange them with where I've got Paris. I think Atlanta Reign will squeeze in. Purely because, yes, some people are calling them the mean team. Because they've got some players like DeFran. But, whatever you say about it being a mean team, it's got some very good quality in it. And if DeFran can find form, especially with the meta that's currently in Overwatch, it's very beneficial to Soldier 76 and Hitscan, and it's very DPS based right now, where they can do a lot more damage to the tanks we've been seeing recently. I think that could work into Atlanta's favour, to be quite honest. So I think, again, they'll be in a tussle with Dallas Fuel, Paris, Houston, but I think they might just squeeze in, which could be really interesting. So, the last of the teams that I want to say are in that tussle. Now this is controversial. My 10th place team, my very middle ground team, is Los Angeles Valiant. Now, the Valiant, I was disappointed in their transfers, simply because they didn't bring in a player good enough to replace Soon, in my opinion, who went to Paris. The problem is I don't think Soon can carry Paris. I was debating on actually putting Los Angeles outside the playoffs entirely. But I think their support line is very good. So I think they can get up there, and that's why I've put them in 10th. I definitely don't think they'll be in the top 6. Difficult. And if they do get into those 7 to 12 playoffs, I don't think they make it into the grand finals. I think it might be a difficult season for Valiant, unless they make some changes in mid-season transfer window. But 10th is where I've got them. So now we are into our top 10, which we can directly compare with the ESPN stuff and all that. In 9th place, I have the Hangzhou Spark. The Hangzhou Spark, I think, are a pretty promising team. Pretty much all Korean roster. I think Hangzhou can do quite decently here. They could even, perhaps, depending on how well that roster gels to playing in the Overwatch League, they might make a push for 6th place, and I mean 6th place only here. Because this is coming up is basically, including Hangzhou, the 4 teams that I think will be competing for the last automatic playoff place. What I mean by automatic playoff place is the top 6 are automatic playoffs to go straight through to the grand finals, whereas 7 to 12, they play in a playoff to go to the grand finals, basically. So, I think Hangzhou will be competing for that. Who else do I think will be competing for that 6th place? Well, in 8th, I've got the Shanghai Dragons, would you believe it? Now, this isn't too much of a surprise, probably, if you've seen other power rankings. There is a big belief that Shanghai have improved well in the off-season. A big changes to the roster, but they've kept the players that were actually quite decent for them last season. And they brought in some good quality. I think Shanghai can go on and get a 7 to 12 playoff place here. And maybe, just maybe, if they can get it going, they can try and push for 6th. But I honestly think they will be in the 7 to 12 playoffs, and we will see later on in the season. I'm not prepared to make a judgment on what might happen if they get in those playoffs, because we just don't know. Very unknown entity Shanghai this season, even though they were in the league last year. Who have I got just missing out on the automatic playoffs? It is, in 7th, the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, I'm not sure about the Gladiators in all fairness. They've made some decent signings. They've also made some signings that are banned for the first few games. It's interesting, but I think their tank line is fairly reliable. And I think that's a very, very big bonus. So I think Gladiators have a very good chance. I think they'll definitely be in a playoffs. I just think they've got a very good chance of actually being in the overall grand finals. But I think they'll definitely, if not in the grand finals, be in the 7 to 12 playoffs. And have a good chance of winning those playoffs as well. So, I think it's promising for Gladiators. But now we get to the nitty gritty of things. The top 6. The people who I think are going to the grand finals. In 6th place, we've got the San Francisco Shock. The San Francisco Shock are looking very good. And the reason I say this, they haven't made too many changes. They brought in Striker, which is enormous. Striker is a fantastic player. But also we go on what happened last season. They started off very poorly. But when Super and Sinatra came in, when they were eligible, they started to improve. And you look at stage 4 of last season and they started pushing real hard for those playoff places. And yes, they were, because of their downfall in the early part of the season, when they didn't have their full roster, that let them down ultimately and they didn't get to the playoffs. But I fully believe if they can keep up the form they were showing in stage 4 of the Overwatch League last season into this season, I fully believe they'll do very well. And that's why I've got them in 6th. San Francisco Shock, I think it's an incredibly promising season for them. And I can't wait to see what they do. So, top 5. In 5th place, we have the Seoul Dynasty. Seoul have made some very good signings in the off-season. They've not only acquired Changun from the London Spitfire, they have also acquired Fisher, obviously, and some very good other players to add to their already decent roster of the likes of Fletter and Ru Jae-hong. So, yes, Seoul are improved. I don't think they're winning material right now. I think it's going to take some time to gel. But I think definitely they are a playoffs team this season. I really don't expect them to be down anywhere near where they were the season just gone. Bearing in mind, yeah, there is 8 new teams. Yeah, we know that. But I think Seoul will be up there. I really do think Seoul will be up there. But I don't think they'll win it. In 4th, we have the Philadelphia Fusion. Your runners-up from last year's Grand Finals. Philadelphia Fusion are just coming into the league with a very gelled roster. They really haven't changed much. Have they even made any transfers? I can't remember now. But they are coming in off the back of a very good season last season. And they're coming in with no gelling to do. They can just hit the ground running with what they had last season, which was already a very good model. And they've got very good DPS players in Carpe and EQO. So, I honestly think Philadelphia will do decently this season. I expect to see them in the grand finals once more. But would they be able to push it one further? Remember, these power rankings are for the standings only. They're not for perhaps winners of the overall thing in the grand finals. Because when it comes to that, it's anybody's game. We saw that last season. So, I definitely think Philadelphia are going to stay grand finals material, and I expect to see them in their 2nd season of grand finals in a row. There we go. Top 3. Well, you might have guessed this from the beginning, right? But what you might not have guessed is the order. Now, I have had enormous difficulty deciding this order. I really don't know who will be top of the seedings. And it could be any one of these teams, out of the 3. There could be some outsiders that come through. Again, like Seoul. There could be some real outsiders. But these are the top 3 that I would put at this point. In 3rd, I'm going with the London Spitfire. And the reason for this is, yes, I know London finished 5th last season. But London took their foot off the gas. Plus, they had a very dodgy Stage 3 because they had an injury to Birdring. And their backup in Hureg questionably wasn't good enough. London have improved with the signings of Krillin and Guard. And I think they have a decent DPS backup for if Profit or Birdwing gets injured. I think the one big problem is if Profit was to get injured. Because I think Profit is absolutely crucial to the London Spitfires lineup. And if they were to lose him, I think Spitfire honestly could plummet without Profit. But if they lose Birdwing, then I think they're looking okay with the replacement of Guard. So the only problem letting London down, I just think they're too inconsistent. Too inconsistent to be top of the seed, to be quite honest. But I definitely expect them to be in the grand finals to try and retain their title. And if they aren't, it'll be one of the biggest upsets in Overwatch League history. So it will be the biggest upset in Overwatch League history, I expect, because there is not that much history to go by. But top two then. This ultimately decides who I've got top of the league. It is between the New York Excelsior or the Vancouver Titans. In number 1 seed, I have got New York Excelsior, and in number 2, I have got the Vancouver Titans. Now, this was an extremely difficult decision, more difficult than putting London in 3rd. I am going purely on the fact that New York Excelsior have experience in the Overwatch League. That is all that's driving this. I have found it pretty extraordinary that people have been putting Vancouver as low as 5th, 6th, 7th. No, I don't see that. And right, if we run over this again, it was only about a week ago that we went over Vancouver. Vancouver is runaway from Contenders Season 3. An extremely good roster that's been around for a very long time. Runaway are big names and big players and will be right up there. I would not expect them to be anywhere else. The only thing we have to debate is if Vancouver pull a Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty came into the league last season with a lot of judgment on their back, being lunatic high. Runaway are basically the equivalent of that since the Overwatch League started. Will the pressure get to Runaway? And they might just not do anything. And I say get to Runaway, get to Vancouver. Will the pressure get to Vancouver and they fail miserably? I don't think so. I think they will learn from the mistakes perhaps Seoul made. I think Vancouver is a bit more of a steadied ship. But I don't think they'll be top of the seed. I think New York Excelsior are too powerful with the additions of Flower. Especially even just Flower. That's crazy. Excelsior's DPS lineup, I don't believe there is anyone in the whole league that can go toe-to-toe with that DPS lineup. Apart from London Spitfire. And London Spitfire, I don't think have the diversity that New York Excelsior have in the DPS lineup now. Unfortunately. I think New York Excelsior will top it again. But I think it will be much, much closer than it was last season. Vancouver, and this is another thing about Vancouver, Runaway, which is what Vancouver basically are, were very often, up until Season 3 of Korean Contenders, very often were the bridesmaid and not the bride. And what I mean by that is normally they were runners-up rather than winners. And they managed to change that in Season 3 of Korean Contenders. And guess what? Runaway have just won it again with an entirely new roster. So expect to see that roster in the Overwatch League next season. But I don't think Vancouver will top the seeding. I think it will be New York Excel. But I think this season overall is going to be much, much closer. I don't think we're going to have a team that is rooted to the bottom going 0-40. I think Washington will challenge other teams. I just don't think they'll have enough to see these wins through, and I think it will put them at the bottom. Again, Chengdu I think will be competitive, but nowhere near playoff material. New York I think will be very, very good, but I don't think they'll dominate like last season, because there are so many people to contend with them now. You've got Vancouver, who can go toe-to-toe with Excelsior. You've got London, who already went toe-to-toe with Excelsior. You've got Fusion, who beat Excelsior in the Grand Finals last season. Seoul are much, much better, can probably go toe-to-toe with Excelsior. So can San Francisco. So can Gladiators. So can Shanghai. So can Hangzhou. So I think Excelsior are going to find it much tougher this season. I don't think that will stop them, but I think they will find it much tougher. Right, I will run through it again. Number 1, New York Excelsior. Number 2, Vancouver Titans. Number 3, London Spitfire. Number 4, Philadelphia Fusion. Number 5, Seoul Dynasty. Number 6, San Francisco Shock. Number 7, Los Angeles Gladiators. I knew I'd get that wrong. Number 8, Shanghai Dragons. Number 9, Hangzhou Spark. Number 10, Los Angeles Valiant. Number 11, Atlanta Reign. Number 12, Dallas Fuel. Number 13, Paris Eternal. Number 14, Houston Outlaws. Number 15, Toronto Defiant. Number 16, Guangzhou Charge. Number 17, Boston Uprising. Number 18, Florida Mayhem. Number 19, Chengdu Hunters. And number 20, the Washington Justice. That is my power rankings for the 2019 season of the Overwatch League, which starts in a matter of days. I am going to bring you, most probably tomorrow, a roundup featuring the first week's fixtures, which includes a very tasty game between your holders of the championship and your runners-up from last season, London and Philadelphia. But that is where I leave it. Those are my power rankings. In the comments, if you disagree or agree, let me know. If you've got some power rankings of your own, also let me know. I'd be very, very interested in seeing them. Because, again, as I've said throughout the video, you just don't know. Who knows, Paris might win it. Chengdu might win it. Imagine that. Some of these teams are just unknown entities and we don't know how they'll merge into this league. But I am going to leave it here because basically my voice is giving up. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.